Stand. In the end, you'll still be you, one that's done all the things you set out to do. Stand. There's a cross for you to bear, things to go through if you're going anywhere. Stand. For the things you know are right, it's the truth that the truth makes them so uptight. Stand. All the things you want are real. You have to complete, and there is no deal. Stand, stand, stand. You see, you've been sitting much too long. There's a permanent crease in your right and wrong. Stand. And there's a midget standing tall, and the giant beside him is about to fall. Stand, stand, stand. And you know, they will try to make you crawl, and they know what you're saying makes sense and all. Stand. But don't you know that you are free? Well, at least in your mind, if you want to be. Everybody stand. Welcome back to Town Hall Cafe. That was the lyrics from Sylvester Stewart from Sly and the Family Stone, and I dedicate that to everyone that's taken a stand in this country in the last week for what we know is right and what we're going to have to continue to do in this country, in our city, and all across the world. So we're here again. Welcome back to Town Hall Cafe Los Angeles. And this is our fourth podcast here at Morris Media Studio. And we thank Morris Media Studio and its owner, Felicia Morris, for hosting our podcast in this historic Leimert Park in Los Angeles. My name is Pat Diggs from STEP Academics and Operation Backlot. And I'm here this afternoon with Kathy Guyton from the Empowerment Council, A. Couture. She was our special guest last time, and we have invited her back on to be a part of our conversation. And today we have a very special guest, Mr. Michael Gwynn. And he's a social worker and a activist in our community. And we want him to come in today to, just to chime in and just, again, help us figure out, the situations that we all face. So we're just sitting around here this afternoon having a conversation about building a thriving community and how we must lead and participate in making this happen in the 21st century. So let's just start out on, what's going on in all of our worlds, just get a sense of what's happening not only here in Los Angeles, but also around the country. And so let's start with you, Ms. Guyton.
Good afternoon. My name is Kathy Guyton. I am on the board of the Empowerment Council, Economic Congress West in this area. I just was thinking earlier about high school. My daughter is 13. She's about to go into high school, and looking at the high schools in this area and getting very anxious, because if we're looking at the academic progress reports that the Department of Education in California puts out, there's a new pattern. But if you look at the previous APIs, the schools in this area are sad, unfortunately. And the fact that I actually, even now in middle school, have to drive to Culver City to drop my daughter off to make sure that she gets a good education instead of going right down the street to the school in my area, it's saddening. And it's not, LAUSD isn't doing a great job in this area. You go out to different schools in the Valley, you go out to different schools in other parts of the more economically profit, let's so to say, areas, and they're not even their private schools, their regular schools are outstanding. The fact that we have to sometimes bus our kids out to that school, it's ridiculous. We need to have better schools, better schools in this area so that our kids, first of all, are educated, and most of all, feel safe. We don't have shootouts in our schools, fortunately, like they do in the Florida schools, but that doesn't mean that they're safe. So one of my goals is to try to, not necessarily have a fight, but, get on the LAUSD about what they're not doing. Because I don't want to bust my kid out to a school where she's the only one out there, when she can go to a school in her neighborhood if we make it right.
And what about you, Ms. A. Couture? What's happening in your world?
Well, I agree with everything that Kathy stated. And even from the economic standpoint, there's a lot of rebuilding and there's a lot of regentrification going on in South and Central and East LA, but there has not been adequate planning in place for what they're going to do for the education system. So I think that as we begin to discuss the changes and the planning that is being made for the city, we have to be able to look at all of the support services that would be needed to maintain the community as a whole and not just one piece. It's all a great piece of the pie. So I think that was a great segue into all of the development and changes that are going on within the city. There's a lot of planning and development for downtown LA, for East LA, Boyle Heights, for MacArthur Park, here as well with the corridor, and specifically off of Manchester and Vermont. The city did take eminent domain off of that strip that they were going to, they're fighting with Swaswani developers on developing that area of land, but it has plans to bring in an amphitheater. It has plans to bring in a gourmet grocery. They have plans to bring in a leading elite pharmacy into the area.
Okay. I'm sorry. So where is this?
This is off of Vermont and Manchester.
Okay.
And yes, in Southeast District.
Right.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Well,
Mr.
no,
Gunn.
I too. Well, first, I thank you for the opportunity just to kind of, and have me on just to, speak about, just the topics are so merged with each other. Just you can just pick one out the air.
Sure.
I am also with the Southwest Area Neighborhood Council on the Plum Committee, and so and I also did attend the town hall with Maxine Waters, and you referenced the proposed development. But to back up somewhat, I don't think the desire for us to come together never left. It's just between more liberties in the 50s with Brown versus Board of Education, then our social upliftment. We tended to go in other communities. We dispersed, which kind of lessens our effectiveness. There's no difference between the suburban schools and our current schools. The reality is that there hasn't, in my opinion, there hasn't been there's been pressure, but a large collective amount of pressure to sustain, because you have other ethnic groups that have different objectives, and we haven't always come together for the same thing. Right. But I think we can go back and reference our history, and I think what we've done before we can do again. Second of all, it goes back to the overall, and I know you mentioned about community engagement. Right. It just goes back to group self-interest, and it's not necessarily a geographic situation, but those that have similar issues, concerns, to come together to address that. And what would you like to see a community educationally? See, I think we need development, but it's a two-edged sword. In one sense, it's great. I personally like Trader Joe's, but I don't like going over to Westchester all the time or wherever they're located. Right. But and on the other side, there's always displacement. Of course, gentrification. I mean, that's kind of like the side issue related to development. We have to look at the fact that all development is not good. So part of my particular focus with Plum is to, one, be informed and address some of those issues at the ground floor. Us taking issue at the time when they're breaking ground, it's pointless. It's already going.
Right.
You have to get
Correct.
You have to get the ground
wrap.
floor
Correct.
before they file the
Exactly.
permit.
That's right.
So
Exactly.
that's my little take on it right there.
You're 100% correct, and we are in a precarious situation where we have to make tough decisions, tough reactory decisions, but they are tough. And to the point that you were making about the strong engagement, I look at Culver City; it's just a stone throw away from Lamert Park, Baldwin Hills, Ladera, all these historic West Adams. They're not a suburban school, but there was a report that came out that said they had upwards of an 82% parental engagement in their school system. And their schools are not charter, but their parents treat them like they are a charter program with their level of engagement. So it's like you spoke to, it's put a pressure on them to produce these results because the PTA is so strong, their relationships with the teacher union is very strong, or versions of it, not necessarily a teachers union. And so as a result, they're producing this school that's not even a mile and a half. I mean, you're on La Cienega and Rodale. You are in Culver City.
Yeah, it's like night and day.
You're on La Cienega, you come to Crenshaw and Rodeo, you're not, and there's literally less than 0.5 miles that separate them, So I think that, like you're saying, it's important for us to look at all of it. But yes, they are, developing. And
well, how many people were at the meeting with Ms. Maxine Waters?
From what I can guesstimate, probably about maybe 3. I don't really know the capacity of the church. You had a few standing against the wall. Maybe I would say a low end 3, maybe high, maybe 4, depending on the church. But it was a good number. I think the presentation was thorough, not just by
the developer.
The developer too. Congresswoman Maxine, she gave her piece in terms of just the position of the county, city, councilman, and then that's a whole nother conversation as far as the pros and cons of that. But in terms of her allowing the developer to speak and to give, I'm glad the developer gave some background to what staff with their program. I mean, their development initially. And she didn't come off as placating. She just said, look, this is where we were at. We were somewhat undermined, and now we're back on track. I get that. And it's before you even break ground, there's a whole process involved. Right. The regular permitting process around environmental impact, then the political, that unseen green giant that just, you don't know where it's coming from. It's always a roadblock. And we get that. But once again, whether it's, the educational piece or just development, like-minded individuals, we have to come together in a sense. Even, I call it operational unity. I may not agree with everything that you're saying, but if we can be sophisticated enough to come together for this particular fight, then I call it broken window syndrome. Just all that side stuff, let's talk about that later, but let's stay on track. Right. Because a lot of times, we've personally engaged in certain things where it's just, it kind of, and then it takes forever to get back. But that's just, but it's a beautiful thing because we're coming together and we're trying to create something good, but it's a struggle. Right. Life is a struggle.
And also maybe it's a learning curve too about how to work together. Yeah. How to engage together for a common good. I mean, you look at other communities. I mean, you have to work at that. In terms of building, some kind of strategy and maybe making some type of lines, this is what we're going to discuss today. I mean, you do this in corporate America, when you have, different groups, you come for a debate or, some kind of consensus. But the main thing, as you were saying, Michael, is that we're moving forward. And at least you have that representation. And at least people feel that we are a part of things instead of at the end of the day, while we were isolated, So, but anyways, my big thing this week, I was reading this in LA Times, and I'll show this. Crises, decades in the making. Nearly 58,000 people live in streets and shelters throughout LA County. How did it get so bad? And I don't know. I mean, 56,000. I was trying to figure out how much is 56,000. I figured this out. The Staples Center holds 21,000.
Yep.
Okay, so you're talking about 3 Staples Centers full of people who are roaming the streets with not shelter, and heaven forbid, talking about sanitation issues. And so, and then that's one question. That's one situation. Then the other question: how did it get so bad? I mean, what do you do? I mean, and I remember, we all remember. I mean, I lived in D.C. and I remember going to the Capitol where you actually had to step over homeless people. I don't even like to call them homeless people, houseless people.
Displaced.
Displaced. Right, because it can happen to any of us at any given time during our economy. So my question is, what is the city, if the city are, and we're not, I mean, LA's not the only one. I looked it up. In New York City, you have 60,000 people who are misplaced, 15,000 families, 23,000 children. Okay, Chicago, 48,000, 12,000 under 21. And the total, if you want to count, is 500,000 people homeless in the United States of America. And I think during the Depression of 1929 to 1935, there was 2 million. And then you start then you start reading about this, and people are so concerned in these communities and neighborhoods about, if we build housing for the homeless, somehow that's going to create additional problems for our neighborhood. Well, these are people, these are human beings. Where are they going to go? You know, I mean, are we just shoving them off, you know, in the ocean or in back alleys? And so I guess this is a rant from me, because it's like, what kind of city are you living in when, you know, you go down to downtown LA and you see these big skyscrapers? You know, we're living in a time when we have the money is there, but you cannot, you know, attend to the most vulnerable, and the most vulnerable can be any of us, you know, at any time. And so, does anybody know what the city's doing about? I mean, I heard that there was a mandate by the state.
Defer to you. I mean, I mean, yeah, but I'd like to hear from.
Well, the information that we got was that there was going to be another count, that they were asking volunteers to help with the count, and that there was the propositions that were passed were supposed to be helping and assisting the homeless. Have we seen that yet? No. So that's the initial thing is okay, so the City of Los Angeles, you said you were going to do this. Now putting pressure on them and getting people behind us to put pressure on them on what's next, because the situation isn't getting better, it's getting worse. And I want to piggyback on what you said, Pat, because for some reason, people think that these homeless are all crazy.
Oh, no.
They are, you know. No. Look, you know what I'm talking about. They're all crazy.
I know. Mental
you don't
illness.
want them to live by you because they'll steal everything that you have. These people are exactly like you said, us.
Right.
Put in a bad situation, and it only got worse. It could be me. It could be you. It could be any of us. Yeah. Exactly, at any given time. So let's put that to a side. We are not better than these people on the streets. These people were, like I said, were in bad situations that only got worse.
Yeah. And you think also too, I mean, urban planning. To me, it's like I sat down in my car one day and I said, you know, this is not rocket science here. You know, I mean, this one thing that this country does well, they know how to contain people and they know how to house people. Yeah. You know, and in terms of just building, you know, having some buildings and designated, you know, and you can have social workers, psychologists, you know, trying to, you know, each one, you know, what is your issue and try to get them to a step 2, but at least give them the dignity, you know, of some shelter, you know, over their heads. And I mean, it's a whole social issue that can come about this. And but what's not going to work is just letting things fester letting things get worse. So 56,000, okay. So what? We're going to wait for another 56,000? I'm trying to understand the mentality. What is the psychology of that?
Well,
benign neglect?
Yeah, if you look, one piece. If you look at just from a purely public health point, you got to deal with the big piece where they had hepatitis A.
That's right.
That's just from not washing your hands.
That's right.
I don't think they need to put that on a particular ethnic group. I just think it's more prevalent now than it was before, but that's just my opinion. You got to deal with the public health piece right there, if nothing else, because these camps are unsanitary. I've been a social worker with the county for about almost 25 years, and so I think I've seen it all and dealt with it all. And so, we do have a program that deals with homeless families, but it doesn't rise. It would have to rise to a situation where it's child abuse and neglect. We don't fault people for being poor.
Right.
And people have the right to stay in that position if they want to. And people have the right to, to do what they want to do or what they feel is best. But if it gets to the point where the children are not having their needs met per the law, that's something different. But I think the homelessness started back when Reagan, I think, got into office, and they called it Greyhound therapy, where the way to decentralize the mental institutions. I can even recall my father talking about trickle-down Reaganomics. My pops was real vocal about when he came in office. He took more issue with Carter, but I can remember him talking about, ship them off to California. Okay, that happens. And cumulatively over time, you got, those individuals. And trust me, if you don't treat the mental illness, it's going to continue. So that's one piece. Then people just through no fault of their own, laid off, displaced, 2 or 3 paychecks, and it's a wrap. Any one of us, if you ain't have anything saved up. Then you also have a situation where people, whether you plan or not, just there's other ancillary issues, but for the most part, with our department, we try to not only, if we come into your life, we try to at least provide you with services. That's one piece. I'm pretty sure that it's effective, but not as effective when, in one sense, there's a sustained effort to try to build housing. But I just didn't think LA City or County were prepared to, the logistical part of it. I'm wondering, did they have any other models in other cities that were able to counteract it or deal with it or mitigate it? And then again, you're dealing with a political piece too. Okay. We want to help them, but how much do we really want to help them? Or be perceived as helping? I don't know. I'm not accusing anybody, but I've seen a few things that kind of may lead to that. But we'll see.
Well, I think that speaking to all of it, from the business and economic side, they did. I don't know how valuable this is going to be, but the city council did sign a resolution that each council district will do Project 222, and they would build 222 very low income units within their district by 2020. And that from that census that was taken for the homeless, that they would have 3,030 units, roughly, my math is a little off by times the 10 councils, but they would have over 3,000 units by 2020. My question and my concern that I would like to bring to them is that no matter what, as far as dealing with it, definitely from a public health issue, definitely from a social and political issue, the core issue is that if our city, as well as our state, does not continue to receive the resources as far as jobs, as far as education, like how this conversation started this evening, we are going to continue to have people that are boxed out of what's going on. A lot of the people that I speak to that are homeless, especially working with a lot of young moms, is that they just can't afford to maintain the cost of living compared to the wages that they're receiving. A lot of the people that are out in their cars and in their RVs are working poor. And so you cannot have a minimum wage at even $15 an hour, which sounds great. But they said the average cost of living in Los Angeles, you have to make $86,000 a year to be able to afford a basic living for a family of four. So when these people don't have the resources and the income, we're going to have this problem regardless.
And so then that means that, if you're going to have this problem, not everybody's making $86,000 a year. So you are going to have more and more people being houseless. So then maybe the city should sort of kind of begin to plan on that.
Yes, and I think that we need to also work at changing the laws. And so we have to start holding companies accountable for, wage disparities. We have to start asking them to have multiple position levels available within an organization where your skill sets can be varied, where people within the community can be able to get jobs in the city if they want to stay here, where we have to have more rules about commuting. If you have to go more than 15, 20, 30 miles to get to work, there needs to be some added incentives. Right now, if you buy a brand new car that's a hybrid vehicle, you ride in carpool for free. That was an incentive that they created with car makers that helps car makers sell cars. It helps the city with traffic. It helps the toll collection. Everybody wins. So we have to begin to apply that pressure, like we discussed with education and other things, on how we can put things in place for people to have the things that they need to be able to work and not fall between the cracks, because that's what displacement is. It's just someone who fell between the cracks. They threw all those balls up and did not catch them all or keep them juggling. Also, with changing rules, there is a law that says you cannot sleep in your car or RV in a residential neighborhood between 9 p.m. and 6 a.m.
Wow.
That is wrong. And so you're increasing all types of things that can happen. If I'm a mother and I'm a single mother with a daughter and I'm displaced and I don't want to be in an unsafe environment like a downtown corridor up under a bridge, absolutely, I'm going to pull my car into a quiet family neighborhood or by a park or in a parking lot of a school or grocery store, something that's well lit where we can sleep in the car and still be safe. And they're going to most likely want to be somewhere close to work because they're working poor or close to the child's school. So to create a rule like that, because there was a few short-sighted homeowners who don't understand or are not thinking outside of themselves.
Who don't care.
Or they just don't care. You guys maybe said a little bit more. They don't care. But that's a lot. I mean, in LA, they will give you a ticket, if you don't observe it, even when it's on an overnight, even if it's in an area. Where are you supposed to go? And then what happens if they get too close by the bridges, or if they create these encampments, then you disperse them. Or if they try to create a fire because you put them somewhere by the water and it's too cold, that's equally illegal. Or if you put them by the mall where there's no people, that's illegal because that's the fear of theft, So I think that we have to really begin to put pressure on the business community that are bringing jobs and things into the community to say, look, you have to spread this out a little bit, either more job education and training where people can increase their wages. We need to have something in the school systems to better support families. A lot of families I talk to, a lot of them are poor. They don't have care for their children. Daycare is so expensive. After school care. I know a young lady right now in South LA. She has 2 daughters. She's 25. She's one of those displaced people. And she says the child care for her 2 daughters is $836 a month. And so, I mean, I alone pay $412 for my daughter to go to after school care just between the hours of 2 when she gets out of school and 5:30 when I pick her up. That is, and that's a rent. That's at least a quarter of your rent, you know. So if you're putting that out and you're still making $15, $17, $19 an hour and then you're dealing with language barriers, and you're dealing with those who have other social economic issues. You're dealing with prison reform. There's just too many things that you're battling, and then you tell me I can't park after 9 o'clock. I mean, that is just, after a while, you're just like, you know what?
Yeah.
People, and that's what makes people mentally ill. They are pressed up
pressed
against the wall, and when you
pressed
don't
up
have
against the
anything
wall.
else you can do, you snap. And
Or
so
pushed into crime.
you're pushed into crime. And so
And then unfortunately, you get shifted to seeing us.
and you get shifted to see
So sometimes, unfortunately, parents, it could be anything. And if the parent is overwhelmed, you have so many mandated reporters that subjectively will call in a referral that they may need to consult, but there's so much pressure from their administrative supervisor to call on certain things that can be handled and mitigated just amongst themselves. But that's one piece. And then second of all, there's a concern now, and I'm kind of like shifting somewhat from the educational homelessness piece. The number of single homes that are headed by single mothers. And I know that's been going on for quite a long time. It's just, I don't, there's a balance, and I definitely commend just single parents, period, first of all, but just have to be majority female and mothers who are very, very strong instinctually, and just, they do it. It's just that I don't know. I know what happened. I know what kind of put us in that position, but, looking at our future there, and my daughter who's in college, I look at what opportunities as far as finding a mate. That, and then what happens is that cycle gets into another spool. So leads it to be not necessarily disconnected, but I try to maintain, outside of getting, some people say when you get understanding, but also she knows she's grounded. She knows where, her strength and who I am and what I'm about, but also knowing that you have to give back. So, she's in a career path. Well, not quite yet, but you got to bring it back here. It doesn't have to be L.A. Right. It's got to be somewhere where you can offset some of that, what folks are dealing with, and impart your knowledge, so we don't have to have this. The cycle, but I agree with my colleague here. It's just, this new tax cut is good short term for the individual taxpayer, right? But for the most part, there's still no mandate for employers to really pass on the savings. Bonuses are great. No, give a raise, right? Give some more job security, right? Along, and then we'll take it. Man, I've been looking to get it. See, and that will help offset some homelessness in that sense. But it's a lot,
and it's greed.
Yeah.
It's like they talk about this income gap. That's real. That's right. It's like all the money shifted, from majority to the. I remember when I was growing up, when I grew up in the Midwest. I mean, these companies, they still got their money and everything, but they provided for their employees. I remember my father had a bonus. They even gave turkey away for
pensions,
and pensions. He retired with a pension and Social Security. Yes. And mind you, these companies, they made their share too, but it was a little bit more. Yeah. It wasn't as tilted as it is now.
And they care for their employees.
Right. And I think what you were saying, too, Michael, is that something happened during the 80s. Something happened, and now it's at a point now, no, this is just how it's going to be. You're just going to have to be at one wage for the duration. And, if you make retirement, that's up to you. And, but you're spending all your time working for a company. I don't know. I just think that things happen out of necessity, and I think people are going to have to start questioning, their councils, start questioning their city, because it's just the equation just does not come
That
out.
up.
And I'm going to say something really radical, and a lot of people do not agree with me when it comes out of my mouth, but I definitely want people to hear my heart from it. We really have to put a curve and a limit on this social responsibility giving back thing.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is that companies right now, because we're patting them on the back for doing a little, we went to Africa and created water, or we're recycling, they feel like it's okay because as long as we went to a local high school and we painted the walls today, aren't we great? That does not help at the bottom line.
Right.
We can, as parents, we want to be able to know that we can have a safe school for our children. We want to be able to pick them up and have a dinner time, you know. We want to be able to have a good library and be able to take them home and be able to read with them. So don't pacify us by doing these little social responsibility
That you
campaigns.
should be doing
which you
anyway.
should be
Anyway.
doing.
Anyway.
And these little philanthropic efforts, and you say, oh, okay. If, for example, you know, everyone's celebrating, and I do think it's good. So many of these companies have pulled out of their relationship with the NRA, with the and Alamo, not Alamo, Enterprise Rental Car and United and Delta. But if you hear what they're saying, oh, we'll no longer offer
Right, I read that.
discounts on their travel. We'll no longer, we don't want our name on their website anymore. And so what happens is people go, oh, let's celebrate them. They did that. And I go, that didn't make the school any more safe. You know, like you didn't do anything at
PR.
all. That is
between
just
the
great
lines.
PR.
Great PR.
And no, my thing is, no, take that money that you receive to them
Yeah.
and do something in that school or in local schools where your corporation is held or for those families, you know? So I think that, you know, back to what I was originally saying, if we stop, you know, giving them kudos for things that they're supposed to do and we start holding them accountable, I tell them every person that comes into a company should be able, you should know who in your company has a family, who in your company, you know, and you're able to make your corporate bylaws and your company's employee handbook around those incentives. If you have, I am a single mother, like you know so many of them. If you have a large number of those individuals working in your organization, you need to have flexible hours, you know.
And the child care.
And a child care,
childcare.
you know, and a child care program. I don't need you. You know, I have a great company and they do nice things for me. But a lot of the things, you know, they just make it comfortable for me to come back to work. And so what they'll tell me is, oh, okay, well, your daughter doesn't have school. Yeah, she can sit here at the desk with you, you know. But the fact of the matter is that may be a work from home day, you know.
Right,
Because they'll say,
right.
oh, your daughter is sick. Oh, you can bring her to work and there's a little cot that they put her on. No, that needs to be a stay-at-home day because what I'm doing can be done from the computer, you know. But
Kinda
so,
sweet.
and yes, exactly. We can have that same conference call on the computer. So I think that we need to start applying more pressure to make them actually do something tangible that we can use as well. And then we need to combine it with the city and we need to start celebrating companies that have those incentives so that more companies will follow in that direction.
I also think, and to piggyback on what you said, that people are going to disagree with me, we need to, 10 years ago, apartment in Lemert Park, smack dab in the middle. I remember because I was that person, was $565. Now it's 4 times as much.
Oh, wow.
That's ridiculous.
That's ridiculous.
Why am I paying $1,300 for a 1-bedroom
Right.
apartment in a neighborhood where you said the income is not all that high?
Exactly.
So if I'm paying $1,300, that's the majority of my check. What about electricity? What about, well, you know, some of the houses don't do water, but what about, you know, resources for my daughter?
Yeah.
What
No.
about a car? What about all of the other amenities that I need on a month-to-month basis? If the majority of my money is being spent on rent, I'm not living.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it creates all of these other systems and issues. You know, I mean, if I don't do anything else but change in LA, I want to make it mandatory that they start putting washer and dryers back in these units.
Right.
You know, it's not profitable. I know it helps small business, as they tell us, but that's another expense for so many families. And we don't think about the little things, like you said, with the water and those who have to pay gas and electricity and those who have to move their cars because they get tickets because you try to institute this street cleaning thing on Tuesdays and Fridays from 10 until 4. And it's so all over the place. And then people are stuck with these $68 bills, you know, on their car. It's just not helpful. And so I agree with you 100%. Like, they need to say, if in this area, you know, this is the rent, even 10 years from now, you know, we are going to at least keep it in a range that supports what this area is doing.
Make rent control
Yes.
work. Because, you know, even some of these landlords, I'm not trying to take your money away from you, but you have increased because you know that there are other people moving into the neighborhood. So you will increase the rent twice as much.
Right.
When you know full well that the people
Right.
who live in your complex do not pay
Right.
that. So why are you, you know, you're making the people who kept you in business for years and years and years not able to live there anymore simply because you want. But then other people bring in other problems.
Right.
What you don't understand is that those same people who stood by you, who paid their rent, who, you know, did all of this, they were good to you. But the other people might not be.
Right.
No.
Right.
Might change the whole.
And
Right.
those people open the door to larger developers. And that's what I've been speaking to a lot of, you know, small business owners as well as small landlords. I'm like, what's the same way you may turn against your nice little 30, 40 unit people who
Right.
supported you between
For
that $700
years.
and $1,100 payment. As soon as you bring in that $2,000 person, they will go with the developer that will knock down your unit and build 200 on top.
And call the city on you every day.
time and say,
For
you're
every
not
little
passing
thing.
this code and
Yes.
you're not having these, or it's going to be awful. And so I agree with you. They just have to do better about coming up with a plan that is profitable yet sustainable for everyone, and to be able to look at it and say, before it's a social issue, before it's a public health issue, it is a money issue. And we have to be able to show the city that they're losing money by having displacement. And we have to come up with a plan as communities and as small business owners and as social activists to really show what the income could be if you had a better working environment for people.
And you think about it too, you know, to just wrap up this little section here, is that if that would have happened maybe 10 or 15 years ago, maybe we would not have had 56,000 homeless people. You know, it's like, I think we really are in this segment of our history, is that we keep talking about this for the last 3, but we really need to be creative and standing up and being engaged and saying, this is what we're at least suggesting, working, and rather just sitting back and let this tumble out, because it will tumble out. You know, and people more and more.
56,000 people. Imagine, what if they turn? What if they get so angry that they say, okay, let's band together, and then we'll be on the other side of the card.
Or let's take it a step further. What happens if that natural disaster hits? What happens when that earthquake hits?
Right.
They are not prepared for that number to quadruple if we had a natural disaster. And the way we're on a fault line and the way we're not focusing on our environment right now, we are just a disaster waiting to happen, because there's so many people who are barely making it. I mean, these 56 fell between the cracks, but there's a lot of us that are gulping for air every single day. And one natural disaster would probably be the thing that just shuts it down for maybe half of this city. And so we have to look at that.
Well, on that note, we're going to take a little break, a little 30-second break, and we're going to come back and we're going to go a little deeper with Kathy Guyton, Michael Gwynn. I'm sorry, Michael Gwynn, and also Aid Cordor. So we're getting ready to go deep after 30 seconds. welcome back, everybody, to Town Hall Cafe, Los Angeles, and we're just here having a conversation. So we're going to go a little bit deep in our conversation right now. We have some great people at the table, and we're going to be talking about, how civic engagement and what's going on. So first of all, I want to introduce our special guest, Michael Guyne. Gwen. I don't know why. I'm so
No, because it's spelled with a U.
It's spelled G-U-Y-N-N.
Yes.
Okay.
Little Irish last.
Little Irish. But Michael, introduce yourself. What you've been doing and all that.
Well, my focus right now, believe it or not, is trying to be the best man and father I can be. Outside of that, my vocation right now is to make sure that those that come behind me are afforded a better opportunity. Whether it's nuclear family or the community as a whole. But I've been a children's social worker for almost 25 years with LA County, with various departments. Where I've been able to have an impact. You have a personal and professional impact that you feel good about what you're doing. But it seems here lately we have a new director, so hopefully that dynamic changes in terms of being so intrusive into families' lives. Where we're looking back, a lot of times we should have never been involved. Now you may not have the administration admit that, but I know for a fact that there's some things that we need to improve on. But for the most part, our department is affected depending on where society is. Mm-hmm. 1 year it was a period of time where it was family preservation, then it went to adoption focused, and then it's just it's a dollar figure for every child you detain, and so that's not the way of it. So now we're trying to empower families, give them back their power to work out what's best for them, mm-hmm. and not get so involved with the court. Because if they've been functioning for X number of years and, things have been, let's get back to that. So one, it's not a type of burden on the county service where we can put that in other places, but also in the sense that I believe that what we've done before, we do again. We're our own best regulator. Whether we were forced to have our own business district, even private homeschooling. I mean, there's some things that we need to get back. Like Sankofa, go back and fetch and bring back forward. Right. And then also, I've been with the neighborhood council for about 6 years. Oh wow! And then the National Association of Black Social Workers for about 20. Mm-hmm. And so we have a local chapter here. We've been doing some things locally, but for the most part, I'm just a pillar in community, a servant. I guess I'm more behind the scenes, power behind the throne. I don't, whether I'm I want to be on the front line, but whether I'm, there to the point in terms of being media, that's not where I am. Mm-hmm. I'm glad I'm able to kind of convey, my thoughts and my feelings and theories about things, but, you got several out there that do that and not really saying anything, and that's on them, because you got to be held accountable with the community on that one. I'm not necessarily a judge, but it's just that we got to kind of coalesce into one. Whether we're able to get help from the government or not, we have to come together and say, look, this is where we're at, and let's move forward and take yourself out of it. Get back to what grandma and auntie and uncle, what despite things, the differences, they still came together. So, that's kind of my thing.
So I have a question for you. With your background, working, psychologically, sociology, with, the people in the community, what is the one thing that you would suggest? How do we go forward, not only as a group of people, but people in this country? I mean, how do we go forward mentally and psychologically as we face some of these social ills that are coming our way or are in our way?
Well, individually, a person has to make a decision on what type of quality of life that they want. Mm-hmm. And that's real. It's so subjective we can put out variables out there to look at, people to strive for. The TV and Facebook are so powerful.
Right.
But we put certain things out there that can easily catch the eye of something that, may not necessarily be media healthy, but we could also change around and put some other things out there that are wholesome, things that will contribute to your quality of life, where you don't have to worry about your children picking up bad information or actualizing some of the things they see. Because once they get out that door, it's just a whole nother world. Mm-hmm. You do what you can as a parent, but there's some things that you need to foster to buffer that. And also, secondly, collectively, as a community, how do we want to see our community in terms of, crime prevention, in terms of not having food deserts,
right.
Being in a position where, things that go down as a group, whether you have a block club or not, or a neighborhood council, you can address it immediately and have that direct line with the city council person or whomever, and make sure that I'm not saying like a fortress. I'm saying, even when it comes down to lawn care, everybody in the neighborhood got, line together at one, we need to have a conversation with that person, right, because it ain't about the property value, it's the continuity.
Right.
And I know for a fact, where I'm off the Jefferson Park area, where it's being heavily gentrified. I'm a big stickler with keeping lawn care together. I do. And it's a way you can tell, people to, but that's just one instance. But but in a more of a global sense, just like I said, referring back to our own experience and how things were, I can remember when I was young, when somebody got a new car, they came and drove around. It wasn't about showing off. It's just that sharing my blessing as opposed to look at me.
Right,
now it's something totally different.
Exactly.
Or when we come together for a gathering or a rent party, it wasn't about a situation where, well, man, she can't pay her rent. And I thought, no, it's like this is what needs to happen, because if she goes down,
you next.
I might go down.
That's right.
If it come for me in the day, it ain't gonna be at night. Right. So it's we're all interconnected, whether we like it or not. Right. But we're on this earth together. So right. Until your time is to check out, right. Make it the best.
Yeah. Yeah. I hear that we have a call. Okay, how do we? Okay, wow, our first call. Headphones. Okay. Yeah. We got a call. Hello.
Yeah, this is Darnell out that Tuscaloosa area.
Oh, hi, Darnell. How are you?
I'm doing good. Yeah, I was listening to y'all talk. I was hearing y'all passionate about what y'all speaking about. I wanted to add to it.
I'm sorry, Darnell?
I was saying I was listening in.
Yeah.
I heard y'all was kind of passionate about what y'all was talking about, and I wanted to add to it.
Oh, sure. Go right ahead. Appreciate it.
Okay. I wanted to say... I wanted to speak on about the homelessness and everything y'all was speaking about. Y'all made some good points, but y'all got to understand we live in a capitalist system.
Right.
Capitalism system. And capitalism system, it has no moral base.
Mm.
So part of the system is population control.
Okay.
So homelessness, drugs, sex, entertainment is part of the system. So within that is, like I say, the population control. So one of the teachings of Minister Farrakhan is be self-efficient.
Mm.
And so my question is, how do we build a system kind of similar to their system, but how do we build a system to be more self-efficient that fit our needs so we could be outside that system?
Mm.
Because their system has no moral base. How can we build a system that has morals in it and that's built for us?
Yeah. Kathy?
I think, if I'm hearing him correctly, I think one of the things that Michael brought up at the beginning is when we desegregated, it could have, some people think it was the worst thing that ever happened. There's pros and cons to that. One, like I was talking about for education, trying to bus my daughter to another school instead of trying to figure out ways to make our schools better and to make our communities better. bringing the rent parties back again, because nowadays some people don't even know their neighbor who lived next to them for 10 or 15 years. That's sad. Calling the Department of Social Work on people because you think something is wrong with the way that they're dealing with their kids. Right. When your kids are going crazy, be in the background. Yeah. It's just a whole set of things that we need to do as a community. Come together, talk about some of the issues that we're having and dealing with them, and not... It's also, we talk about, even in our own community, the lower class and the upper class. You talk about the people on the hill and the people down at the bottom, and the way that we treat each other. Because just because I don't have a $500,000 or now $1 million house doesn't mean that I don't have a say in what goes on in my community. Because I've been here for 20 years, so I do have a say. So I think it's us getting into a room, like you were saying, and even though we have different issues and we have different opinions, if there's one item on there, say like the homelessness, all of us have the same ideals about that. It needs to be, we need to deal with it. Now, we might have different ideas of how we deal with it, but as long as we come into the room and start talking about dealing with it, then that's the first step.
And I think for me, speaking to your question of how do we create our own system, for a living, I work in marketing and brand development. And I think the first thing that we have to do for our younger families, not necessarily our older families, is that we have to learn how to unplug ourselves and unplug our children. We cannot constantly be on their social media platforms, looking at their television shows, their commercials, their advertising and billboards. We're in their malls, we're in their restaurants. And so it creates this mentality that we want to compare. And we begin to look at our lives versus what the system or the machine, as they used to say in The Matrix, what it has created. And we want to be like that. And we want to have it. I think, speaking to what you said earlier about you used to drive through the neighborhood and people saw your car and it was a blessing. It was because there was nothing out there to really compare it to. Now it's, well, he has it in green, I'm going to go get it in blue because we saw it in blue. Or, now people, it's the competitiveness is completely unhealthy and it's breaking down our families. And we have so many women who compare, the men that they're with, even at young ages, compared to either what they see on television or in social media or what they hear in the music, and they want to look like this and act like this. So the first thing we have to do is we really have to train ourselves and our children how to unplug and how to break away and begin to develop our own identities. I think our parents had a leg up on us because they read. And when they read, those books created an imagination, and you created your own identity and your own definition of what you wanted for success. And you weren't constantly stimulated by every pull and tug of someone who is paying a corporation big money, to put an item in front of you. So I think before we can start to build anything, we have to go and do an identity analysis and figure out who we are, what works for our families, what works for each individual community. What they do in Atlanta will not work in Los Angeles. It just won't. They're not dealing with the same issues that we're dealing with in the inner city. And so we can't put all of us in one basket, but we can collectively as a group. And Black Panther showed us that. We can put our money, our time, and our resources into education, empowerment, identity, people that help promote the positive identity, and be able to really start to cultivate a new thought process.
Yeah, and Darnell?
I'm here.
Oh, you still here? Okay. And because I think what you're saying is so true. And I think we're all, in this era of time that we're feeling that, there needs to be a shift. And I think it's that creativity, that we have to figure out in our own communities, to make that shift and to realize that I think we might be greater than what we think we are.
Absolutely.
And I saw Black Panther yesterday.
Ourselves sometimes.
Right. Yeah. And Muhammad Ali said that. Muhammad Ali said that. And also, I saw Black Panther yesterday. I thought it was a fantastic thing. And I think, it's showing us that we have the power. We have lasted in this country, since they brought us over here till now. And there's a reason why, because there's something in us.
Yes.
There's something in us, and we have to garner that, and that was, to me, that was the whole point of the movie that I saw, Black Panther. It was like that. It's something that they've tried to take away from us, but they can't. And so that's what we have to really hone in on and be creative and move forward and move positive. I mean, if we can put basketball, I just saw, what's this guy? I can't remember. Somebody from Utah Jazz, last week, an all-star game. I mean, we have that power. Yeah. You just think about, we can put that power on Wall Street in our communities. But anyways.
And even let's take Black Panther. We have single-handedly crashed all of the statistics and historical records as far as people going to see movies. I've seen schools they sponsor students in schools. I've seen churches go in groups. I want that same intensity about going to the polls. I want us to take entire schools, senior classes, to the polls to vote, or putting a candidate of your descent or your gender into office. We have a lot of we have a gubernatorial election taking place in June or July for our governor of California. Nobody knows that, not to the level that they need to. Right. Who are all the people that are involved? What are they running for? They're running the state of California. So if we can go in one weekend, bring in $374,000 this week alone. 404 millions. I apologize, not thousands. $404 million in a 2-3 day weekend. Do you know what would happen if we put $404 million behind an African American venture capitalist firm, or behind a woman-led startup, or behind some Hispanic business, or something that just builds and edifies our communities and our families? If we put $404 million into building the school that Kathy spoke to, we just have to stop looking at what I sometimes feel. We do things when there's a competitive edge to it. Oh, they don't think that African Americans are going to support this movie, so we're going to prove them wrong and go out in droves. But there's no competition to go to the polls. People don't see the incentive or the value.
Can I add to that?
Go ahead, Darnell. I think we have a couple minutes. I really want you to get into. Do we have a couple more minutes? Okay, one more minute, Darnell, and I want you to call back next time. I'm sorry. Okay. Go ahead, Darnell.
But yeah, I was going to say that was well said about the Matrix, and I wanted to say y'all made some good points. But I was saying we definitely need to break the mold,
right,
of going to somebody that's not going to help us, because their plan is already in place.
Right.
And I think we need to move forward and lean towards ourselves and hold ourselves accountable. And that way we know who to go to.
Right. Okay. All right, Darnell. Thank you so much for calling in, and call back. We'll be back, in another 30 days. So I appreciate you calling in. Thank you so much.
Okay. Y'all be good.
Okay. You too. Okay. And I think we're at the end of our show. I want to thank everybody. Kathy, you're going to have to come back and talk about those departments. Thank you, A. Couture, and again, thank you so much for being a part of our table here. So
I'm humbled. Thank you.
Okay. Well, I thank you, everybody. Come back for Town Hall Cafe Los Angeles, and stay woke and stand.